Welcome to Delingpole, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here is the podcast host, James Delingpole.
Welcome to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my guest. There's a clue. My guest, I'm not going to mention his name yet. I'm going to talk by myself and be really interesting, showing that I don't need any guest to improve my show. I can just talk, and my guest can fart ass around the kitchen like he's doing at the moment, not coming to join my podcast, and I don't care. Go on then.
Listen, my coffee making is not only essential, but it will add an air of authenticity and depth to this otherwise lackluster podcast. See how much it's improved now I'm here?
The guest is finally here, Dick Delingpole. Dick, just tell us briefly about the extreme trauma that you've just been suffering.
Well, I suffered what's known as wife hiding the coffee pot syndrome.
Yeah.
I think you can probably guess what that entails, listener.
You were desperate for some coffee, weren't you?
But the more I thought I wasn't going to get a coffee, the more I wanted one. And now I'm afraid we're behind schedule. And yes, this show is every bit as shambolic in its organisation as it sounds.
Just tell the special listener friend where the evil witch of a wife hid that coffee pot.
In one of the cupboards.
In one of the cupboards. I mean, who would ever think of looking for a
stoop so low, which is exactly what I had to do to get it.
Yeah.
Anyway, can you hear that faint sound of...
Oh, I can hear the bubbling noise, yeah.
Good.
You've got, what do they call those coffee things?
I don't know, it's a screw together sort of aluminium-y thing.
Where it bubbles from the bottom into the top.
And makes proper coffee.
Like the Continentals make. Actually, it doesn't, I think strictly speaking, if you spoke to a kind of modern coffee connoisseur, one of those guys with beards in a, who does special things.
V60s for you.
Yeah. I think they would say that technically those things burn the coffee slightly.
I can't imagine that they wouldn't. You wouldn't be able to make it at 80 degrees or whatever it is the hipsters like to do.
They cold press it.
Hang on a second, I'm going to go and pour.
Okay. Dick has now got his coffee, so all is well with the world. I've been drinking tea. So Dick, I gather this week you've actually done your homework, unlike last time.
Yes.
And you've made lists.
I've got a list. I've got a yes/no game. They're actually very difficult to compile.
They are. I know.
It's not just a simple matter of pulling names out of a hat.
Yeah.
They've got to be relevant and contentious.
Yeah. Because you are kind of the yin to my yang. And maybe this was a weird sort of arrangement of God or nature. Mm-hmm. That one brother was kind of like me, sort of flaky.
Yeah.
And the other one was organised with a sort of filofax. Well, mind you haven't got a filofax.
It's a notebook, but it's a grid-ruled thing, which is just very obsessive, as if horizontal lines weren't enough.
With the sort of neat handwriting you'd have if you've been to art college and you were a designer.
At the right time. No one can write.
No, they can't. They can't. They are so...
Nobody reads. Nobody writes. It's tragic.
Yeah.
Our listener has been commenting through Twitter. Mm-hmm. What they would really like us to talk about is more war. Specifically this time around, war films or movies for our American listener.
Well, we could do a bit of that. I have to say, I have got another Twitter friend, who was going to do that with me.
Oh.
Who's always saying clever things about war films.
Right.
And I'm going to meet up with him sometime, but I just haven't got round to it yet. Well, no, we can look. There's never enough.
A cursory skirting over of the thoughts that I jotted down on this actually quite a complex subject. I mean, if you start talking in terms of what's the best war film, are you talking in terms of which one you got the most enjoyment from, which one was the most grittily horrific, and then you can categorise it in World War I, World War II. And then you're not even covering, for instance, Zulu.
Dick, we could do the war podcast. Actually, you could actually have just the war podcast and actually Warcast, and actually that might happen one day because look, we've got all my special forces buddies. So many of them now. Unfortunately, all my old World War II buddies are dead, which is really sad. Yeah, but it's
inevitable as well.
Inevitable. But yeah, we could talk about war films. We could talk about actual war. And do you know, rather helpfully, because you've sprung this on me, I actually watched Hacksaw Ridge only about 3 nights ago. Have you seen Hacksaw Ridge?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God. I mean, Hacksaw Ridge, the combat scenes make the first 10 minutes of Saving Private Ryan look like Bedknobs and Broomsticks.
No
The
way.
animated scene. Yeah, they do. It's that.
God.
It is that. You've got a scene. I don't know whether this is actually possible, but you've got a guy who advances on the Japanese position, firing, I think, a BAR from his hip, while holding in front of him the torso, which is all that's left of one of the previous wave of US infantry, which has tried to take this position in Okinawa, and he's using it as a shield against the Japanese. I mean, it's sort of. It's the ne plus ultra of war horror scenes.
Right.
And the only thing that lets it down, and somebody else commented on this, is that it does rather look as though it's been filmed in a studio.
You don't want that.
Well, I don't know.
Which was the woman that was filmed at the Vietnam filmed in a gravel pit in Wapping or something like that?
Oh, that was the Stanley Kubrick,
Yeah.
Kubrick film, whose name temporarily eludes me. Full Metal Jacket.
Right.
Which I can't watch because I think it's a fake Vietnam film. I just think, okay,
Well, the gravel pit in Wapping doesn't help, does it?
Doesn't help, and it's sort of urban warfare in Vietnam. I mean, it's a bit like they might have just as well have filmed it in the professionals multi-story car park. That's how it
would be a bit
felt.
like doing World War One without involving trenches, which would be legit, of course. But there's certain
Legit
things
before
that
they started building the trenches.
Yeah.
Now,
on to World War One, and
I like the segue there.
I've just been. Well, I'm currently reading Paths to Glory, which is one of the best books on the French in World War One.
Not Paths of Glory.
Paths. One's a film, the other's a book.
I see. Okay, right. Yeah. Paths to Glory.
And I think you might be right, but this is a historical book rather than a film fantasy thing with Kirk Douglas or whatever it was. But I'm at the early war part, obviously, because it starts at the beginning. And the problem with the French. If you ask a British person, the problem with French soldiers is, what would they say?
What, in World War One?
No, what would your average Brit say if you started him off saying, the problem with the French soldiers is...
Oh, well, the French have a reputation for kind of running away, don't they, or something?
Well, exactly, cowardice. But their problem was actually too brave. And I know there's going to be people laughing at that, but they had a tactic which was purely based on attack. So they'd see the Germans, they'd line up, and they'd charge in with bayonets. Everything was done at the bayonet. It was all about firing off a few volleys and then going in and taking the position. Even if really you should be in a defensive position because you're about to be overwhelmed, it was always attack. And they were known to be utterly fearless, but fearlessness doesn't win you the war. You get mown down by
machine guns.
Exactly, and so the German tactic was advance, dig in, put the machine guns in, and prepare for the inevitable attack. And of course, the French, quite an outmoded army at that time, still with the red trousers and the blue coats, were just charging in with the bayonet and getting wiped out.
Yes.
And so it's one of those things that where the myth is just simply that they're not cowards; they were just too brave, if that can be a thing. But anyway, I'm quite early on in the book, and it is fascinating stuff.
That's very interesting. And of course, you think how unfair it is really about the French being not brave when you think who were the most formidable infantry in Europe and
for many years.
Yeah, exactly. I mean under Louis XIV and in the Napoleonic era.
Arguably for centuries, they were the best army in Europe and the most modern, certainly by Napoleonic times.
Yeah.
You don't get that by being cowardly.
But probably a mistake to maintain the tactics when machine guns have been invented. They kind of should have picked up on that one.
Yeah, they did pretty quick, but by then you're into trench warfare and everyone's bogged down.
Yeah.
So back to the films briefly, because this section could probably cover this off. I've made a lot of notes on this, so if you strip away that section and give it to another special guest,
well, then don't be affronted, Dick, because you are the only guest.
So
don't forget.
The categories I got down here were black and white, World War One, World War Two, other. But other. You're going to have Napoleonic. How many Napoleonic war films do you know?
I was about to say the Charge of the Light Brigade when I suddenly realised that wasn't even Napoleonic.
That would be an easy mistake that other people would make.
Waterloo.
Well, there's Waterloo. The Duelists. Do you know of that film?
Yeah, Ridley Scott.
It's a very good film. And for period accuracy, it's bang on the nose. And
and of course, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell.
Norrell. Yeah. Which, again, brings us on to another problem. Not a film.
Not a film, but jolly good Waterloo scene.
Yeah, good Waterloo scene. Good, yeah. Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
Say what you like of it as a film, but we both agree that the Vietnam scenes are amazing, short as they are. So are you allowed to count things like that? Then it leads us on to some of the best TV, some of the best war stuff has been made for TV. Do you remember that German-made one that was 4 parts?
What, Das Boot?
No, it was about the 4 young friends who...
Oh, no, do you know what? I was not so... The main guy in Babylon Berlin, was in that.
Oh, right.
And
Generation War, it was called.
I had
a 4-parter.
I had objections to that. I thought it was just a bit... I thought that... I can't remember now. You have to go back and read my Spectator review, but something about it annoyed me.
One becomes a nurse and the other one's a German Jew, so ends up in a concentration camp. That sort of... Or does it? I can't remember. Probably it does.
But the combat scenes in that good?
Again, it's another very, very gritty one. But and of course, Babylon Berlin. I've just finished the last part of the 2nd series.
Oh,
it's just so wonderful.
How awesome is it?
It's. I can't imagine any of our special listeners not enjoying Babylon Berlin.
I love. So look, let's briefly Babylon Berlin. It's got so much going for it, hasn't it? It's got the reason the Nazis came about. That era of turmoil.
Chaos and madness that was Weimar Berlin.
It's got hallucinogenic drugs.
Yep.
It's got really, really hot girls.
Yep.
It's like Bulldog Drummond meets, I don't know, Hunter S. Thompson meets
a little bit of Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah. Well, it's just
meets Singing Detective in a way.
Meets Singing Detective, and you've got the fantastic cabaret scene.
Well, this is what I'm thinking. The Singing Detective element. I mean, it's a great detective story, but it's got this crazy sort of like acid house meets 1930s jazz. As if that's what that time could have been like.
It just makes you love the Germans, actually.
They've got a lot going for them.
I kind of quite like the Germans.
They're very like us.
They do stupid stuff, but they're basically like us.
Sometimes they're very naughty.
Yeah, sometimes they're very naughty. But yeah, I like them. They're solid. I mean, they're much more like us than the French. And I'm not dissing the French. The French have special qualities, Frenchness mainly. Yeah. But the Germans, we like them.
Yeah.
Yeah. After all, don't forget, they came across to our island and kind of, the Angles and the Saxons.
Bread
and sort of, and we got some
of
their
became
words,
our royal family.
Ficken, I believe is one of the...
Well, I'm starting to form, well, not starting, have done over 50 years of life, formed stereotypical views of our European friends. And yes, I think you can make generalizations about them. The French are the way they are, as briefly discussed. They're quite rude, but lovely when you get to know them.
Very arrogant.
Arrogant and rude, and I don't think that's a gross generalization.
But they have a style.
The Hungarians, I've made an opinion on them, having recently been over there, of course.
Then you can go first.
I reckon they want to be like Germans, but they're too Southern European. They're too Mediterranean in their outlook. They're like lazy Germans.
I think mad as a box of frogs. Kind of genius, but just a bit...
God, I admire them politically right now, though, because they are some of the great hopes of Europe.
And the Poles.
Again, just been to Poland. Just listened to your last podcast with the...
We've had 2 Poles on now. We're overdoing Delingpoles.
Yeah, the Delingpole show. Yeah. That's another podcast in its own right.
You think?
But the Poles. So what's your opinion of the Poles? What would be your crass generalisation of
very,
the Poles?
Very good at charging tanks with lances.
Right. That's so very Polish.
And also, in their Spitfire, aiming head-on at an ME-109... and not even caring whether the German...
My South African wargaming friend with whom I play War Thunder online, I was talking to him only yesterday, he said there's a very good Polish film, reading it back here, war film based on Spitfire squadrons flown by the Poles. but it's a Polish-made thing.
I'd like to see that.
I said, how did they film it? Was it real Spitfires? He doesn't know, but very good.
Have you noticed, by the way, that we are so digressive that you actually managed to lead away from the... we didn't even get to the actual war film.
No.
You talked about
I think
the
that's
list.
just the way meandering works,
Talked
isn't it?
about the list.
Talked about the list, yeah.
Apparently, by the way, I read, just while I was waiting for you to make your coffee, I read on Twitter a review in The Spectator of podcasts. And this was the Kate Chisholm, the Spectator's radio critic, and she said that even though lots of people listen to podcasts, the vibe she was getting was that the people who made the podcasts didn't give a shit about their listeners. That wasn't the phrase she used, but she said there was no sense that they cared about their special friend. She didn't use that phrase either, but we're not like that, are we?
I think if you make a podcast but don't listen to podcasts yourself, you might fall into that trap. But I certainly do. I mean, you know the ones I listen to.
I do.
The best ones are very much bearing in mind your listener.
But Dick, I don't listen to other podcasts. I invented this all by myself.
Right, you invented the podcast.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I think I did, actually. So that's good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
Well
thanks.
done you.
Thanks.
Do you want to mention one or two of the films? Because I'll tell you what, another one of the things, back to my South African friend.
Yes.
He immediately said a film that I wasn't even going to mention for fear of being laughed at, but Kelly's Heroes. He said he's got such fond memories of that film, and it's kind of like a gateway war film for kids.
It is a gateway war. I was going to say, I watched it again the other day, some of it.
It doesn't age well.
It doesn't age well at all. It's actually, I think it's quite insulting now. You've got the Donald Sutherland character who was a hippie, a late 60s hippie, translated later to 1945 or whatever, 44.
The tanks are quite appalling, especially the Tiger, because it's just a dressed up Sherman or something even more modern.
And that scene where they fire the paint instead of the armour piercing.
This is why you shouldn't go back.
And also, but I remember.
But I've got really fond memories of it. But you know, it
that's another category, Dick, or not altogether related, but films that you enjoyed at the time, but you shouldn't see again now because they're Jacob's Ladder, for example, the Adrian Lyne
film. You raved about that at the time.
I loved it at the time, but so many films have imitated it since that
and done it better.
Well, it just seems cliched now, whereas it was actually quite original when it came out because it was the first.
Yeah.
So Kelly's Heroes, I agree, a gateway film, but not worth watching again now. Whereas some movies...
A lot of the black and white ones have borne the test of time. You can go back to them and just the era they were made in. They were so well crafted and scripted and acted.
There is a very strong case to be made that the 1952 Dunkirk is a much better film than the recent one.
We probably watched that in the gym at our prep school.
We did watch it in the gym. And
on those very special film nights where they'd put out all the mats on the floor and they get the projector out and everyone would pile in.
Do you remember the score?
The score?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, yes. Yes. Do you remember the score
I think
for the recent
William,
one?
Is it William Walton, I think?
Is it?
I think. Well, actually, the score for the recent one was done by Hans Zimmer.
Right. And
Zimmer is the kind of preeminent movie composer of now. And he based the soundtrack. God, I'm getting quite trained. I could almost be Matthew Sweet on Radio 3. Is it Matthew Sweet does the...
I don't know, you're the only one who listens to Radio 3.
Okay. That he wrote the score to go with the sort of the clock ticking away of because you remember the time ticks by as the Spitfire pilot goes on his mission. But I thought...
It never seems to run out of bullets.
I thought that movie was an interesting failure. I mean, a must-see failure. But it wasn't... Looking back on it, I don't think it's as good as everyone said it was.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed a lot of elements of it. But I put it under this category, it's probably unkind, but stinkers, that actually might have been quite good, because I've written down Fury. Actually, quite an enjoyable film to watch. You've kind of got to leave your brain behind.
Embarrassing. I mean, look, this is the conversation actually I wanted to have with Al Murray. When I do my Al Murray podcast, I'm sure we're going to have this conversation.
Al Murray is going to do that. Well, it's perfect. Watching war films with my dad is his book.
A Bridge to too far is very, very problematic.
Hold until relieved.
It's fine that having great actors doing that, Sean Connery or whatever, but the actual war scenes are appallingly inaccurate. And the idea in Fury that you can clamber inside is what do they clamber inside the scene at the end where they're attacked by an SS division or something.
Well, it's their tank. It's their tank. Is it a Sherman Firefly or just a normal Sherman? Either way,
I think it's a normal Sherman that they can hold off these. The SS were so shit. Yeah, I mean they were famously shit, weren't they? In combat,
absolutely incompetent,
just absolutely rubbish. And so if you're a
shit squad is what they said the SS stood for.
If you were a Sherman tank crew, you could easily fight off about 200
even
Germans.
If that Sherman was immobilised.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to happen.
So it's a stupid... And they were too old, by the way.
Yeah.
Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
They were about 22 max.
It's going back to some of the 70s films where the top actors are getting a little bit old, but they're still playing the leads in the war films.
One more war film we must mention.
Which Dunkirk does quite well, actually, doesn't it? Because they're quite young. Using Harry Styles was quite
Harry
clever.
Styles. Even I fancy Harry Styles. And the film that I absolutely recommend if you haven't seen it, it's quite hard to get hold of, Went the Day Well?
Well, I thought you'd mention that when I mentioned my black and white. But
1942. Classic film.
About
based on a short story by Graham Greene, filmed in typical
on the
English,
home front, isn't it?
On the home front. It was the precursor, of course, to Jack Higgins's The Eagle Has Landed,
right?
And which became a film with Michael Caine. And it's the same premise: a bunch of German paratroopers dressed as English soldiers take over this village, and it slowly dawns on the villagers, and you've got Thora Hird in one of her earliest...
It's a propaganda film, essentially,
It's a propaganda film. But what's interesting... Well, one of the main things that's interesting about it, because it's endlessly fascinating, is that the attitude in the film is, if you want to preserve your beautiful, sunlit village greens and your English churches and your friendly, old, kindly vicar serving tea, you've basically got to kill the bastards. I mean, not the vicar. You've got to kill the Germans.
Right.
These people are the enemy. They're trying to take away what you hold dear, and this is total war. And there's an end to it. And so it's a fascinating document of that period, of the attitudes of that period.
Yeah.
They were trying to instill the killer fighting spirit.
Yeah, this is what Brexit the movie was trying to do with the EU.
Yeah. we need Brexit too, and we need much more.
We need to remind people what we voted to get out of.
We do. We could almost. I think we could actually do more war movies another time, couldn't we?
That's fine. As you say, it's an unlimited well of conversation.
Yeah. Okay. You're listening to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my guest, Dick Delingpole.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow.
Why did we see some of the Republican kissing of Mark Zuckerberg that was taking place?
I called it kissing the ring because I felt like every single person practically had to kiss the ring of this guy, who wants to do nothing except get all those people out of office. So, bizarre behavior from the Republicans.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Patriot 125.
This is Delingpole, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is James Delingpole.
Welcome back to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my guest, Dick Delingpole.
So, do you want to play the yes-no game?
It's either yes or no, isn't it? Maybe.
Shall we do this then?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
This list started some time ago, so these names that will be relevant maybe 3 weeks ago, but you might see the news stories that were happening while they were... So let's start. Captain Jean-Luc Picard.
Ooh. No.
I'm not going to help you anymore, all right? Professor Xavier.
No.
No. Patrick Stewart.
No.
Well, look, let me just explain this bit.
Yes, please.
We'll have a brief digression, because it's partly what this is for. This was back when he was saying that Professor Xavier and Jean-Luc Picard wouldn't have voted for Brexit, or some of that sort of nonsense.
Say that. So basically, he's an appalling...
He is terrible.
He's just a terrible lovey. I don't think... We shouldn't listen to lovers on anything. The only lovey we should listen to is... Well, two of them, actually. Clint Eastwood and Michael Caine.
Yep.
Michael Caine, obviously, because Michael Caine has actually fought the Chinese in Korea.
Yep. Well, we couldn't ask for any more than that.
Clint, because he's Clint. I do. Oh, and James Woods, of course.
James Woods.
Oh, and Captain Kirk.
Is
one of us.
Is he one of us?
He's one of us.
Brilliant.
Possibly there are a few others.
The old guard.
But, the old guard, but definitely not Jean-Luc. I mean, you can tell he's wrong. A wrong one. Jean-Luc Picard.
No. Sure. So we've covered off him in his various incarnations. Here's an easy one for you, Morrissey.
Yes, but yes is not enough.
Yes isn't enough for Morrissey. Yeah. And yet he'll come out with crazy things that we would completely disagree with, but we still love him. You know, it's sort of...
You wouldn't invite him round for a barbecue.
No, or a bacon sandwich.
He would ruin everything.
Yeah.
You'd
be a bit sniffy, wouldn't he?
You'd get the best sausages. You know, you'd locate them at a special place down the road where they do really special sausages.
Yeah.
And you'd get the barbecue just right, and you wouldn't burn them.
They wouldn't be special enough for Morrissey.
No. You obviously get some salads and stuff, but he'd be all miserable.
So no barbecues for Morrissey, but everything else about him. Yeah. Robert De Niro.
Ooh. No.
He's been shooting his mouth off badly
Has
lately.
he?
He's a right tit.
Does he not like Donald Trump?
He's not a fan, it has to be said.
Not many of them are. But that's because, do you know why? They're Hollywood people and they're stupid.
Yes, but listen for the next one.
Okay.
I've given it away now.
No.
Uma Thurman.
Oh, I like Uma Thurman.
I like Uma Thurman.
Yes,
and
I know somebody who shagged Uma Thurman.
What? You can't say that on the podcast,
No, you can't.
Can you?
No, I mean, he's actually a friend of mine. And he's shagged Uma Thurman. Oh, can you imagine?
I can't imagine, but I've probably thought of it.
Actually, you have. We all have. Yeah.
Okay, so she's not a wrong 'un. She's on the nice list, not the naughty list.
Now I can think of her in that Kill Bill outfit, and just like her even more now. I can lust after her and not feel bad about myself with a clean conscience.
Yeah. Theresa May.
No. By the way, just going back to what did you do? What did Uma Thurman do?
Again, this was a
great.
news story some time ago,
great,
and she was speaking out in a very brave way and going against the rest of Hollywood. So,
was it about Israel? No.
I don't think it was. I think it was about current affairs. It might even have been about Trump. But good one. So, is that a no for Theresa May?
It's a hell no, Dick.
Okay, Brian May.
Hell no.
James May.
James May. Yes.
Okay, so
yes.
one of the Mays is all right. Okay. Mae West.
Very useful when you're in the sea. Yes.
Adam West.
Yes.
Fred West.
Oh, no.
No. Kanye West.
Yes.
Now here's a four-namer for you. It's a trick one. Rolf, Carl, Wolfgang, and Florian. Do those names ring a bell?
Isn't that Kraftwerk?
Well done.
Yeah.
Very good.
Kraftwerk, rather, yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes.
They're a little bit Atomkraft 9 Danker.
Yeah, but they're Germans. They can't help that.
They can't help it, no. Lovely chap.
She's a model and she's looking good.
That will sound great for our listener because it will be like it was in stereo.
It will be like that. By the way, can I just pause you just a moment? Can I just vent one of my biggest vents?
Go on then.
Why can't we have music on our podcasts and things? I hate the laws that say that you can't play music without playing gazillions. I think sort of niche podcasts like this one, we should have music.
Well, hadn't they used to end your old podcast with a relevant clip?
They did.
Yeah?
They did, but that's just waiting to be sued by some... No, I don't know.
No. It is a bone of contention, certainly.
Because I wanted to talk about music later on. Anyway,
okay.
Carry on. Yep.
So I've got this chap, lovely old boy, George Soros.
George Soros. Never heard of him. I imagine he's. What country does he come from?
I've got a picture of him in a Nazi uniform, so I think he might be German. Is he German?
Do you know what? I think it sounds like a Hungarian name to me.
Right,
so
okay.
he must be a good. He must be a good chap because Hungary.
There aren't any bad Hungarians.
No.
Nicola Sturgeon.
Cranky.
Now, there's a whole list of names here, and they've all got a connection. But
okay.
You can do a yes, no, and at the end of it, you can tell me what the connection is. So it starts with Nicola Sturgeon.
No.
David Lammy.
No. Can I say, David Lammy is the new Lineker.
We have to add him to J.K. Lineker.
J.K. Lineker. I mean, how is he?
He's an extra head on that beast.
He's beyond peak annoying. He's just like the most annoying. Yeah. What's it called when you reach?
He seems to come out of nowhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so David Lammy is a no?
He's nowhere via Harvard, apparently.
What?
He went to Harvard.
Did he?
Apparently, there was what was the quiz? He was on Celebrity Mastermind. He was just like the most stupid person
he
ever.
Completely tanked, didn't he?
Yeah.
Ian Botham.
Yes.
Kevin Bacon.
Yes.
Michael Fish.
Yes.
John Hamm.
Well, no.
Oh.
Well, I think he's fine in Mad Men, but I think his politics are a bit shit.
Right, okay. So what did all those have in common?
Is it something to do with the weather?
No.
Hurricanes.
Shall I read them back? Sturgeon, Lammy, Ian Botham, Kevin Bacon, Michael Fish, John Hamm.
How can you eat Botham?
Beefy.
Oh, that you didn't say beefy Botham. That was a bit oblique, wasn't it?
It would have been too easy.
That was
otherwise.
a bit cryptic.
Okay. You like Lammy?
Now, every time I eat lamb is my favourite meat, and now every time
I've put you
I
off
eat lamb, I'll be
by...
thinking of David Lammy. Thanks for ruining everything.
Right,
do you know Americans don't eat lamb?
They don't eat lamb.
Hardly.
Surely they eat the meat of the sheep.
Hardly. They don't have sheep in America.
What?
They don't.
We should make our fortune by introducing sheep to America.
Yeah, but the problem is you need a market which likes the taste of it. And
how can you not like the taste of lamb? It's the best
palates,
of meats.
Americans' palates aren't attuned to lamb.
Crispy skin on a roast lamb.
I'm totally with you.
Crispy and salty.
Lamb's liver. I love lamb's liver. It's just so good.
It does sound cruel though, doesn't it? Eating lamb. I mean, it's like sort of saying, "Do you want some baby pig?"
Can I make you feel better about eating lamb? When they're really cute, they're way too small to eat.
Right.
The ones they're only really ready to eat by the time they've lost all their cuteness. Right. It's almost God's way of saying it's time to eat the bastard.
Stop being cute. Started being delicious. Yeah. Right.
It's like chicks.
What girls?
Yeah,
oh right.
You know, when they're yellow, you can't eat them. Or when they go
ready for eating.
Yeah, ready for eating.
Elon Musk.
No.
Grimes.
Yes, musically. I don't know about her politics.
You know they're now an item, don't you?
What?
Elon Musk and Grimes. Doesn't that just blow your mind?
He's worth about, is it 12 billion? I mean, he's even richer than Charlie.
Yeah.
He's that rich.
But going down by the day... No?
No, I think...
Even
you know what?
Tesla goes tits up?
Tesla is a piss in the sea for Elon Musk. I think it's like small change. It's like losing a $5 on the way to buy a packet of fags.
Whoops, there goes my car company.
Yeah.
Right. I've got Oxford-educated actor, comedian and director David Schneider.
Is he? Is he?
He's a comedian. And he's on Twitter.
Yes. I'm saying no.
No,
but,
right.
But But he's not in the J.K. Lineker Lammy,
you
is
should
he?
read some of his stuff. He's
Well,
hateful.
I
Hateful.
don't.
Children's author J.K. Rowling. You might have heard of her. She writes kids' books.
Did she write the Enid Blyton books?
Yes.
Ah, she's quite famous.
She's quite good.
But yes.
German monster illustrator Axel Schlaffer. Axel Schlaffer.
Despite loving most Germans, I think I'm going to make an exception in this case. Yeah. Even though I like the Gruffalo, I don't like the Gruffalo's politics.
Right.
So no.
How about the comics artist Brendan McCarthy?
We like Brendan McCarthy.
Brendan McCarthy.
We give him a name check here. Brendan, if you're listening, we love you, yes.
We love you very much. Long time. Second Amendment expert David Hogg.
Do you know what? I don't think he ever won the spelling bee at his school. I just look at his Twitter profile and he's
a little bit bitter about not doing very well at school.
Unlike the other guy, Kyle.
Well, there's a girl as well who's meant to be quite switched on from that whole.
But the cleverest guy in their year was the guy who's pro Second Amendment, Kyle Kashev. Okay. I think the American special friend will correct me. I'm sorry, I can't keep abreast of all politics and everything. Some American politics just does leave me behind slightly.
It's going to, though, isn't it? I mean, it's not like we're there.
That is the thing. The thing that amazes me about Paul Joseph Watson, how he manages to be so totally abreast of American. I said breast then, didn't I? Mm-hmm. So totally abreast of American affairs, despite living in London. Whereas I find I only really get totally fired up about Americana when I've been to America recently, and you sort of absorb the American thing.
I remember when you wrote your Obama book.
Yeah,
you were asked to write it, and you said, "Look, I know nothing about American politics," and they said, "Well, actually, you'll probably find you do know more than you think," and that turned out to be the case. Because what you were doing with the Obama book, with Obamaland, was saying, "Look, we've had Tony Blair, we know what's going to happen," and it's actually horrific how much of that came to pass. Pretty much all of it.
I was like Nostradamus, and it's amazing actually that there aren't kind of, well, like the guy who set up that website on the basis that he predicted some election sometime, whatever his name is.
Oh, the one who keeps predicting the end of the world.
The guy with the number. The website's got numbers in it.
Oh, I don't know.
Anyway, whatever.
Okay, so David Hogg's a no.
Yes.
Robert Peston.
I met him once. He was fine, but no.
He's definitely a no.
Definitely no.
He's very much...
he's a Remain-tard completely. I mean, just absolutely of the worst order.
Toby, though, has taken him down quite beautifully in that in that thread.
If we're talking about Toby, that's a definite yes. Toby Young. I'm very fond of Toby, and I think it's awful how he's been messed over by them.
Yeah, but he comes out fighting, though, doesn't he?
He does.
He's done a fantastic takedown.
I think, you
know the one I'm talking about, the Oxford thread.
Yeah. Oh, sure. I'm going to do I have not done a Delingpole podcast with Toby.
But you did. You had a podcast with him.
We had a podcast with him, yeah. But I haven't spoken to him recently. But one of the things I'm hoping to learn from him is the horror of going through what he went through, but also has it been helpful in telling him how evil the left really are? Because I think he tried to kind of play the system too much. I think he tried to. I don't think he understands how stacked against us the system is, and you've got to go rogue.
Yeah.
You cannot. If you're like us, if you think like us, you can only go rogue.
It's all the stuff in SJW's Always Lie. It's the sort of how to fight these people, and it is a no prisoners approach.
We are basically,
and a scorched earth policy as well.
We are LERPs.
What's LERPs?
We're on deep patrol in the NAM,
right? In
our tiger striped uniforms, and we just don't take prisoners. No. You can't. We're not the rear echelon MFs. We can't deal with that. We can't deal with orders. We're not going for the
hearts and minds at this stage. We're too far into that jungle.
I tell you what we don't do. We don't take orders.
Let's roll through the last bit of this list, because I've gone from Robert Peston, and I kind of like to have a link between the names because that's the way everyone's minds work. So the next one's Robert Webb. We've had him before, but he led on from Robert Peston.
Yeah,
so Webb.
I'm saying no.
David Mitchell.
No.
David Baddiel.
Ah, interesting. I would have said no, and now I'm saying yes.
That's exactly the right answer.
Yeah.
Was a no, but now a yes.
And isn't that good? I like the fact that we live in a world where some people can go from no to yes. For example, there was another one earlier on. You mentioned Kanye West. Mm-hmm. After his shit performance at Glastonbury, which is undoubtedly the worst performance I've ever seen by any artist ever. Unforgivable. Because the time it took me to work my way into the middle of that crowd to see him, and I thought he was going to play the tunes like straight off the record was all what I was hoping.
I don't know any of his tunes. I
they're
couldn't
good.
name you one.
They're good.
If my life depended on
Not
it.
because of the rapping. I mean that's boring, but the samples and just the tunes generally. Really, 808 and Heartaches I really, really like. The one that came afterwards with the red cover I really like. Anyway, but obviously we don't go into detail here. But he was so rubbish at Glastonbury, but he has recovered himself. He's got a yes.
And in the same vein, Ricky Gervais.
Yes, he's another former no turned yes.
And actually putting his reputation on the line, or if you want to see it another way, actually using his reputation to actually say, no, his freedom of speech is actually quite important, especially for comedians.
Or you could say recovering his mojo.
Okay, yeah. I'll go with that.
See the range of options we have.
I used to think
amazing?
He was fantastic. Back in his early Six Music days, he had a show. It was fantastic. But, yeah. So
wouldn't it be great if people look back on this podcast and said, I remember when Dick and James just did that crappy little podcast and I could tell they were going to go on to really great things.
Can you think of anyone who you can compare us to that have done that?
Well, yeah, Adam and Joe have become like Adam.
Joe is now a great film
Joe's
director.
a major film director.
It is still.
Adam makes a fortune, I think, out of his podcast. I think he does. I think he monetizes.
Well, he can take it on the road. I mean, he took the Bowie one to America.
And what about? Did he?
Yeah.
And what about our USP? We're the only people who aren't left wing. Mm-hmm. Hello.
Yeah.
That's quite a big selling point.
Yep. And I'd rather. I was going to say long may it last, but I'd rather there were a few more like us out there. It's quite lonely sometimes.
I think we're going to have to kill the competition if and when they appear.
Right, okay. Yeah. We're going on the same vein here. Ricky Gervais, Eddie Izzard.
No.
Did you ever like Eddie Izzard?
There may have been a time when I pretended even to myself that I liked him.
The surreal comedy about the cat with a pneumatic drill behind the sofa and stuff like that. It was quite whimsical.
I
and
think
funny.
I went to see him.
Oh, really?
I think I did.
All right.
Possibly, I would have gone free. I'd have thought.
I hope so.
Oh, yeah, that was the perk about being a journalist, isn't it? It still is.
Frankie Boyle.
No.
There's another one who would have once been a yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He's an example of
let history note
a yes to no.
How men can rise and fall. They can rise to a yes or fall to a no. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of world we live in. Fortune's wheel can turn.
I've got three more for you.
Yep.
Omid Jalili.
No.
Oh, God, he's
awful.
He's got one thing. Hello, I'm Iranian. I mean, it wears very thin very quickly.
God, he must really get good at milking that line to build a whole set out of it.
Oh, well, he's milked it every which way. Wow. Count Dankula, because of course that's what all of this is about.
Is it?
Yeah.
Count Dankula, that'll be a yes.
And finally, Jeff Norcott.
Yes.
Exactly. Which leads us on, which we probably want to do in the next section, to the review of the previous podcast.
Oh, excellent. Okay, you're listening to the Delingpole podcast with me. What's my name? Say my name. James Delingpole.
Buffoon.
And my guest, Dick Delingpole.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
The real thing that the left is angry about is they're like, how could you allow these Russian memes? Somebody saw a meme and then they decided they had to vote for Trump. Or it must have been fake news. And by fake news, they mean conservative websites. Come on. But this is what the left thinks. Fake news. And by fake news, what they mean is shut down Breitbart.
Breitbart News Tonight. Weeknights starting at 9 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
This is Delingpole, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is James Delingpole.
Welcome back to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my guest, Dick Delingpole. And I think, Dick, we can agree. We are cooking with gas.
Well, I'm gradually getting into this thing. When I started doing your sort of occasional guest slot, I found it quite terrifying and quite unnatural.
You thought you had to think, didn't you?
I thought I had to think. I thought we had to do something other than what we just do is, shitpost in a sort of brother-to-brother verbal sense. Yeah. And I'm more relaxed about that's what we're now doing.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned briefly earlier on, this is a completely unscripted, unprepared conversation. We would kill it if I'd said, this is what I'm going to talk to you about. These are the names on the list.
I can't.
It wouldn't ring true.
I can't work with that stuff. It has to be pure genius, just kind of coming out of the ether.
Straight off the cuff.
Yeah.
Well, this is the section when we talk about the previous podcast. Now, there have actually only been 6.
7.
6? Well, I've got 6 down here. Maybe you can...
Susanna Maruls.
Yeah, no, she's one of the 6. Okay. Yeah. I might be wrong, but I think...
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. So, in reverse order, so we'll end up with Susanna. The first was Simon Lincoln Reader, your South African friend.
Simon, you see...
So how do you know Simon?
I'm still not sure. I know that I bumped into him at the Spectator party and he was a fan. I met him with Tacky,
right?
Who I think is going to be something like best man at his wedding or something. And
how old is he? He sounds quite young.
He's younger than me.
All right.
But that's not so difficult these days.
No, it's becoming
but
easier and easier.
Simon is, I don't know what the South African word is for a mensch.
Right.
But he's a mensch. He's a great lad. And he's with me on my ambition. You know my ambition.
Mm-hmm.
I want to own a
travel lodge.
A game lodge. Not a travel lodge. No.
Isn't that what they're called?
They're not called travel lodge.
But you do a safari, you're travelling, and you end up at... Don't dismiss it as a name.
Okay. Do you think that could sell? Do you think really high-end customers would be attracted by the name Travel Lodge?
With a nice purple logo, it might work.
You're pitching for the design campaign, aren't you?
I want to be a safari guide. What are they called? The people who drive the trucks around.
A ranger?
Ringmaster.
You could be my ringmaster. Yes, you'd be very good at that. With your moustache. Yeah. In fact, you know what else you could be?
What's that?
You could be my lion tamer.
Lion tamer.
There's an opportunity.
Stand-in wildebeest.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a great ambition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it will work out great.
And do you know who would be really happy?
The fawn.
Well, I wasn't thinking about that. No, Pa.
Pa. Oh, you could see out his twilight years.
I would love to be able to open a game reserve a game lodge before Pa dies, so he can
sit out on the veranda
and just go
on a rocking chair. And actually, he's way too active for that, isn't he? He's still doing like 6-mile walks.
Yes, he is. But I'm just worried that there comes a time in the life. I hope he doesn't mind being talked about this way. But there does come a time, sometime in your late 80s, early 90s, when you visibly become more frail. Well, because you physically become more frail, and I want him to have a good 10 years more doing active stuff. So
don't we all?
So I'm hoping that I can make my fortune and buy
in
game
time
lodge.
For him to have his game lodge.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
No, that's a very noble ambition.
Actually, wait.
Yeah.
If there is a very generous benefactor listening to it, we can open the game lodge before. Because actually, do you know what? Already, I meant to mention this to you earlier. My special friend, who as we know is Legion, has started giving me special gifts. I've had some special tea.
Right. This is how it starts.
This is how it starts. I've had some very special things that I can't mention.
Right.
From a chap called James.
Right.
What else? Other things have I had? I haven't had any free gin yet. I'd like some artisanal gin.
Right. Well, I'm afraid what I'll be giving you later is Aldi's special, and it is actually really rather good.
Yeah. Okay,
but we've got Fever Tree tonic, so
that's good. That's very important. Fever Tree could happily sponsor this podcast, or Fentimans.
You know what though? They're straight into the rich list, the Fever Tree guys.
I know. Why didn't we?
What
think
a
of
gap
that?
in the market, though.
It's obvious now.
Yeah.
It was probably obvious then.
How the competition ever let something like that happen? Yeah. Having someone park their tank on your lawn in quite such a brazen way.
Yeah.
But anyway,
that's
the Fever Tree story.
But so if anyone incredibly rich, I think we're probably talking. You'd need to be worth at least $1 billion, I'd say, probably.
So
if anyone wants to
5 or 6 million that needs to start this
to buy a safari lodge,
travel lodge,
so that my dad can go and I can kind of go there. And we'll all be friends and stuff, and with the lions and and I can identify a lot of the bird life. I'm as you know.
You want the situation where when you turn up on your occasional visit, the lions recognise you, and they would kill anyone else, but they go up to you and nuzzle your hand.
That would be
just like Lemmy does when you come here.
That's exactly how it's going to be. And do you know how I'm going to dress?
As a gazelle.
No, I'm not. I'm going to dress like Stuart Granger.
Of course you are. The classic safari suit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to.
You're always going to carry a rifle.
I will probably have developed a voice like Stuart Granger's by that stage.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that was Simon Lincoln Reader.
Yeah.
Next up, you had our wonderful British but Polish-born MP Daniel Kaczynski.
Daniel Kawczynski.
Kawczynski.
Aren't you impressed that I can pronounce his name?
Well,
do you know how I know?
He told you?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, there you go.
Well spotted. Daniel Kawczynski. What a top man.
Defying every possible stereotype that the left would throw at a Tory.
Can I say, when I agreed to, I can't remember how it came about that I did I think a third party approached me and said, would you be interested in doing a podcast with Daniel? And I was torn because most MPs are frankly shit, unless they're committed backbenchers, because they're also career safe. They're also they're not used. Jacob, of course, is the only person who absolutely speaks his mind. Mm-hmm. I was worried about Daniel, but
no, he delivered. I think he really did deliver.
He was great.
But he's had to put up with so much. I mean, coming out to your constituents like that. It's enough that they've got to get used to the fact that you're Polish, which they didn't seem to have a problem with.
No.
And then suddenly he's gay, and they don't have a problem with that. It was that lovely bit, the old major in the front row going, "Well done, you." It's just a lovely little bit of the story.
It was good, and although I try not to do any research for my podcasts,
right,
if I can help it, I had actually checked his Wikipedia, and I noticed that he had a male partner, having previously been married and having children. And I was wondering at what point I was going to introduce it into the podcast. Right. And instead he volunteered it at the right moment.
Quite a natural, it did come out at the right moment. So he was great. Yeah. Next up was the aforementioned Jeff Norcott, which I think was quite a coup for you to get him. I mean, our younger listener will have appreciated.
I can honestly say I went to see, I did my research. Well, because I got free tickets to go and see him. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's good. Although it was. I really enjoyed his set. I think he was genuinely very funny, and he was great in person as well.
I think the important thing with right-wing comedians is not enough to have right-wing as your USP. You've got to be funny, and you've got to have more to your set. And, I think he does tick those boxes.
I was talking to Dominic Frisby about him, because
Dominic does a bit of stand-up.
Dominic does stand-up, and they all Dominic Holland as well. They all know each other, and they all know each other's sets. I mean, it's like a kind of brotherhood. I say, and that's not even being sexist, because how many female comics are there, and how many funny female comics are there? Ouch!
Ouch!
But anyway, Dominic was saying that apart from being a stand-up guy, he's got a very, very good patter, and I really admired the way he's got these sort of sub-jokes, the way he's chattering away, and he'll just throw in some jokes, but he doesn't even point up. They're just there for you if you want to take it. Yeah. And I just thought he's a real pro. So hats off to him.
Then you had your fishing pal, Mike Daunt.
Who
went down very well with, again, my South African buddy, who over a game of War Thunder, we're charging our tanks through Stalingrad, and he was saying that he liked more of your fishing guy, and that surprised me, because I thought that was a slightly odd one. It was an odd podcast, but it seemed to work, and I painted a picture in my mind of what he looked like. Yeah. Most of the time, I'm listening to your podcast at work, and so I have it on in the background, but I make a point of Googling what the person looks like that you're interviewing. It actually really helps to know what the person... Yeah. They might be tall, short, thin, fat, black, white. You need to know. It really does help, but I didn't do one of him. But your nickname for him and his voice informed me in a way that I probably didn't need to look him up.
Oh, I see. Yes. Well, he was probably my most foul-mouthed podcast. I got to know Mike when I interviewed him a few years ago, I think for The Telegraph, one of the last pieces I did for The Telegraph. And
how long ago was that?
Well, at least it's probably 10 years ago. He was... the bounder, and his cousin was the Bart,
right? The
baronet,
okay,
Richard Haygate, and they were pals, childhood pals, and they went off on. But Mike has taught me how to fish. He's taught me how to double spey cast and how to cast for dry fly cast on the Itchen, which is about as good as you can get in terms of English chalk streams. Very expensive stretch of river,
right?
And I love Mike very, very much, and I've read his book and enjoyed his anecdotes. And I was nervous in that podcast because I wanted everyone else to love Mike as much as I did. And I tell you, it's quite an interesting story here. After I went to do the podcast with him, and we had a really shit day's fishing. I mean, it's like one of the worst ever. It was just
that was after the podcast.
The conditions
you said you were
around
it.
Okay. The conditions were absolutely bloody awful. Right. I didn't catch anything. Anyway, I accidentally took all his rods back home with me.
Oh my God!
And it is after all the man's livelihood. So all these expensive rods are really expensive. I can't remember who Hardy's rods. And all the reels and everything. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to get this stuff back to him? And I rang him really apologetic. He said, when are you coming to London? I said, well, actually, weirdly enough, I'm coming up to a drinks party, so maybe if I'll leave them at that house. Now, just flash back a second. While we were out, we were talking about politics and stuff. He said, if there's one bugger I absolutely can't stand, it's that Michael bloody Gove. Absolute backstabbing traitor and bugger and blah, 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 blah. I said, funny you say that, Mike. Gove's actually a mate of mine. And I said, I reckon if you were ever to meet Gove, you would really, really like him. And actually, I don't think he is as bad as you say at all. I think he's actually a pretty good egg. And I'd love it if you met. Anyway, as it happens, the person whose house I was going to was Gove. And I said, I'm really, really, really sorry about this, Michael, but there's this bloke, and I think you're really going to like him, but he's at some point he's going to come and collect these rods off you. So if you could spare him 5 minutes, would you mind? Just and you never know, you may get a day's fishing out of it. Anyway,
does Michael fish? That was no pun intended.
His dad was a fish.
Oh, right.
A fishmonger or something like that. Okay. But no, the answer is no. He's never been fishing. But they got on like a house on fire.
Yeah,
yeah. It was wonderful.
Oh,
they had
really good.
And I think they are going fishing together at some.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so it's a sweet story.
Wouldn't that make great TV?
It would. It would. Maybe we should. Maybe
Someone's missing a trick there.
Yeah, well, maybe we should do it ourselves.
Listen, the thing I was looking at my watch because I need to put the oven on. So
put the oven
carry
on. Okay. La 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 la. Dick's putting the oven on. Yeah, I think it was really mean of you, Dick, to look at you nervously at your watch in that way and make me think.
I'm very aware that you've got to be.
You threw me off my.
I know.
Oh, yes,
You're on a schedule. I was thinking about you.
Yeah.
So next on the podcast list was John Preston, who wrote the Jeremy Thorpe book that's now being serialized, which is quite relevant for your Daniel Kawczynski thing.
Are you suggesting that Daniel Kawczynski tried to have his gay lover bumped off by a hitman? Because actually, that's libelous, Dick, and he didn't. And also, he didn't do it.
You know what I'm saying? The fact that back then it was scandalous enough to be gay to actually want to commit murder to cover up your tracks.
John Preston is an old friend of mine, and he has written the book of this amazing new TV series, and it's unlike me to be topical. I mean,
you did it by accident, though,
by accident,
accidentally topical.
Look, yeah, exactly. Look how many times I've managed to get Jordan Peterson on the show.
Oh gosh, I must have missed that one.
Yeah, exactly, and me too. Yeah, so he keeps coming over and keeps not doing my bloody podcast.
Almost as if he's avoiding you.
Almost as if he's avoiding me. So I got John Preston anyway, which is very topical, and he what's it called, a very English scandal. And I think you and I were at prep school probably when it was.
I remember it all happening
in the newspaper.
Yeah.
It was such a lurid trial, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy Thorpe, the leader of the Liberal Party, likely deputy prime minister in any government coalition. And he's got this murky past. Even though he's married twice, he's really gay, and he has these string of gay affairs. And one of his lovers proves tricky and keeps trying to touch him for money. And in the end, he or blackmail him.
He hires the most incompetent hitman in the world to go and kill him.
Who ends up killing the dog Rinka, but not because
Norman. The gun jams after he kills the dog. It's awful.
Poor old, and it's a great Dane. Somehow. That's a big dog to kill. Yeah. It's sadder, isn't it?
No,
somehow?
It definitely makes it worse.
Yeah. So John was great, fascinating, but he does have this unfortunate quality of he speaks his sentence and then he ends.
Well, you mentioned that, but I wasn't really getting that listening to it, and.
Maybe these are things that only the interviewer.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't consider myself.
It didn't come across as remotely awkward or sort of stop-starty. It felt like two friends.
But can I say, Dick, I don't consider these podcasts interviews. You know that, but I think it needs to be said sometimes that they are conversations.
Yeah,
and it's the thing that makes it special. Special for you. Not special for you. Special for me, and special for my special friend.
So the final one, which I only listened to today, because let's face it only came out yesterday, was this Susanna Mroz.
Now, Susanna is tall and gorgeous and very interesting. And I could not mention in the podcast the most interesting thing about her.
Her gorgeousness.
No, the thing that I wanted to talk about, because she said to me when she arrived, I can't talk about the one thing you want to talk about.
Right.
And I was, oh, right. And she said, no, the thing is I'm doing an exclusive interview / something or other with somebody else, and there's a reveal, and I can't talk about it.
So you can't reveal that now, even?
So, well,
you tell me after, our listener will have looked it up by now.
So basically I'm going to do another podcast with her and that, and there it is.
Now, what I found with this particular podcast, first 10 minutes were awkward. I didn't fit. It was kind of stop-starty, and then you both warmed into and found your pace. Why is that?
I've just told you why.
Oh, I see. But you were only getting to grips with that there and then.
Well, it's a bit of a shock when you think, I know how this is going to go because I know what I'm going to ask this person about.
But you then went for the whole, tell me about Polish people thing, which I find very relevant because of what we were talking about earlier.
Also, don't forget,
having only recently been.
She's only 18 or 19. I mean, it's quite. The kids are not formed.
Amazingly bright for that.
Oh,
though.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
she, you know,
Well,
world-wise with it.
Like Baz Shemirani,
Yeah,
another of my special guests, they Generation Z or whatever the generation they are, can be on their game really impressive.
Yeah. Well, she picked you up on the Polish Jews thing, which I thought was quite interesting.
Well, quite interesting, and I'm not sure whether she's right or not.
I from what I got in Krakow, I found they're very proud of how in medieval times they took on a lot of Jews.
Yeah, medieval times, note.
But that set the pace for Poland being a haven for displaced Jews.
We need to get to the bottom of this. I do know that Bulgaria was preserved most of its Jewish population in the war. They just wouldn't give them up. And there was one other country.
Sweden was. Where was the one where all the locals started wearing the star in solidarity?
There were two countries which had a particularly good record of saving Jews. Swedes, but Sweden was neutral, so that's neither here nor there. They went to Sweden. They fled to Sweden. Okay. That was different. It can't have been Hungary, can it? Because a lot of Hungarians use that. Anyway, we'll have to say that we need a special Jew podcast. In fact, I want a special
we love
Israel.
The Jews. Oh, God,
I want a special Israel.
I started watching your program, by the way. Your
Fauda.
Fauda. Yeah.
How much do you like Fauda?
It took some getting into, actually. The dubbing and stuff.
It's quite rough and ready.
Yeah.
Dubbing?
It's dubbed, a lot of it.
Yeah, only because they're speaking Arabic.
But they're
or Hebrew.
Dubbing it into English in parts, and parts of it they're speaking Arabic, and parts they're speaking Hebrew.
Oh, actually, no, you're right.
And parts of it is dubbed into English.
Hang on, it's dubbed. It's subtitles.
There's bits of it that are dubbed as well.
I only watch. My version is only subtitled.
I'm sure I'm watching the same version as you. It's on Netflix.
So, are we ending this podcast in a really crap discussion about whether Fauda is?
No, we can move on to more about the last podcast. But dear listener, watch Fauda. It's
Fauda is really. But you know what? There's a new series out now. It's just started.
What, of Fauda?
Yeah.
Well, I've only watched the first 3 episodes of the one that you've got.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what happens, and then you can move on to the. No. At the end.
No, we don't have any of that. So yeah.
We've done Susanna. We've ended that.
Okay, well, it was very good, and I liked her a lot, and I'm intrigued to know what the big thing about her is that you can't talk about.
Yeah, exactly. It's very exciting. So is that it? Is it gin time?
You tell me, because I'm not looking at my watch again for the dressing down that I got last time I did that.
You're just as strict with me as I'm with you.
I do it for you.
Is it gin o'clock?
It's way past gin o'clock.
It's gin o'clock.
Gin o'clock is sometimes as early as 5 o'clock.
You were listening to the Delingpole podcast. Thank you for listening, by the way. Lovely special friend. Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my guest, Dick Delingpole. Thank you and goodbye.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson.
Everything in hip-hop is not bad. Kanye agreed with us, so let's love him today until he raps tomorrow and you turn your back. Because if you jump off when the fun of the moment is over, then you are in fact making Kanye the token he is accused of being. So please, don't do that. Don't go there.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson. Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.